begin with the densest level, the 3D layers that are creating so much of what we don't want. This is unfortunately where the majority of humanity is stuck at present. And I will say from a lot of experience that there's many of us on the spiritual path that are awake, that are still holding this space more than we'd like to realize. So let's begin. In this 3D mental emotional space, we will be speaking without considering anything we're saying, and our feelings are either masked, numbed out, or out of control as negative, imbalanced emotional states. We just blurt things out. Generally, it's very reactive and unconscious, and it's a lot like babbling or having a temper tantrum. That would be a good extreme example of an emotional temper tantrum arising from fear and anger, or a string of mental judgments and condemnations unleashed on another person that could begin with statements like, "You did this to me," or "You don't know anything," or "You're wrong." It can also be just basic unconscious gossiping, or just random opinions about any subject that really are just repeating things that have been heard in the rational, mental, material realm, just repeated. It can be like mindless chatter, where we're just really going through the motions. "Hello, how are you today?" "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Nice weather we're having." "Yes, it is a nice day." So that's sort of small talk that really has no substance behind it, and it's just like programming. Here we're unconscious of being unconscious, and we go about our day in a default mode, doing just what's expected of us, just fitting in. We're not actually generating or creating anything in this space. We're just reacting and following our unconscious programming and allowing our minds to be controlled by outside influences that may be coupled with our own conditioned programming and our own conditioned fear structures mentally and emotionally. Most of the earth and the humans who've not awakened yet live 100% at this level of thought. But even those who are more self-aware, as I mentioned, can still find themselves in and out of this layer more often than we might like to realize. We can just go on autopilot, and this was formed from our 3D conditioning that you've not brought all the way into your consciousness. So it's just something to watch yourself around. It's not bad. It isn't creating a signal that's precise. It's just sort of blah. And you're not going to get much of an outcome from it because it's just repeating pre-programmed things. And this can also look like unnecessary comments, unconscious judgments. We don't realize how much that we can be judgmental. Our mind is very judgmental. It can label things. Any gossip, small talk, it's just noisy, pointless, and petty conversation. It's like meaningless babble, just saying something to be making noise. And this mindless chatting is always going to find itself in this 3D space. Becoming conscious of this level is going to help you make better choices to create with more clarity, intention, and precision. This is something we would call a severe bad energy habit, as it becomes a 3D layer of thought that only creates more of the same tuned out, petty mindlessness all around you. It's really pointless, and it's an endless cycle of low density, unconscious reality creation. You're really more like a robot, repeating whatever your container of mind and emotion has been pre-programmed to believe and speak as reality. And I will mention to be very careful about the media that you consume, because that is really the highest purpose of all the commercials and the television and the news and the anti-life sources out there that are programming us to say what they want us to say and be programmed. This can be in the political arena, where they just program us with, this is what this side says and this is what that side says, and then we just decide to pick one and repeat it. So just really be cautious here of what you put into your container, because that's often what will come back out. So be very selective in what you take into your center of consciousness. The next marker we'll talk about in this 3D level looks and sounds something like this. It's a mental space where you have conversations or arguments with other people inside your head. You can go back and forth in your mind about a situation and how you were wronged or hurt, or how you were right, or just scold the other person for being wrong, bad, or hurtful, or even stupid. You can have a lot of guilt and blame that live here, along with resentment and self-justification. These thoughts can become very loud and consuming habits. This mental space as a bad energy habit has a relationship to pre-telepathy and clairaudience, as this so-called imaginary conversation that you're having inside your head is indeed happening on an energetic level. You're sending highly negatively charged energy to the other person, and they are receiving it, whether they're consciously aware of it as a transmission or not. The other person can feel or will take on the energy you're throwing at them, and this will create karma. This is why one of Buddha's tenets in his teachings was right speech, along with right thought, because as you're thinking, it's really, it's very real. So this definitely includes our inner dialogue. This level has a huge amount of internal motion to it, and it drains a lot of your energy while creating really imbalanced energy fields all around you and around others. In these first two examples of bad energy habits or impure mental hygiene, you're still engaging with the situation very reactively versus just listening and being still. Many long-held limiting habits of thought reside in this layer, and you're likely not aware often of how you cycle them and perpetuate your 3D reality by doing so. The last example that I'll give of a 3D wavelength, and these are just examples so you get a sense, it'll examine a familiar mental state that we've all experienced, and this is really, I think, what we'll recognize as the regular external world and how we work in it. And here we're attempting to figure things out with our mind, to strategize, to fix and problem solve. We're worried about it, and we want to find this answer in our mind for what we're supposed to do. There's still motion here and an internal back and forth type of conversation, as well as a pretty high degree of engagement and emotional attachment as negative charge, because you're really forcing something to happen. This level is about the rational mind's need to figure it out, to find the solution. And this is a very 3D way, it's quintessential 3D way of knowing and learning. Although it's not quite as loud, depending on whether you're very stressed out about it or just really trying to solve a problem. It's not as loud and intense with charge as the other two layers, but there's still a very undisciplined focus in this layer. It has more to do with figuring something out yourself, as in your lower self, your mental, rational mind, than with engaging with an intelligence beyond what the material world can offer through the senses and logic. Your mind is just bouncing around trying to find an answer, and there's likely stress and fear associated with the process of searching for this answer. You can feel trapped and locked into the problem as you struggle to find a solution using your mind. There's a looking outward and a compulsion maybe to find answers externally rather than taking a breath, becoming quiet, and allowing the answer to make itself available from something beyond the rational mind. All these levels are what we would call beta brain wave states, and that's the typical 3D. It's busy, it's fast, it's chaotic, it's unfocused, and it produces very jagged, sharp, imbalanced vibrational energy signals, electromagnetic signals. Just like a bigger stone makes more ripples in a pond, these levels of thoughts create commotion and discord energetically in the ocean around you, and then that's going to be what surrounds you as your reality. And we've all experienced these levels of thought and emotion because we have been raised in 3D, so we know them well. So this is the 3D thought emotion landscape, and all these electromagnetic thought emotions have very low density emotions stacked on top of the thought, and this creates the electromagnetic low density charge that is signaled out into the ocean that's all around you as your steady state of consciousness. You'll be matched here in your realityscape as the law of attraction will return what you've asked for, whether consciously or not. It just becomes the reality within the ocean that surrounds you. And now you see why we need to become very aware of our bad energy habits and train our minds to change our state of consciousness into an ongoing state of calm well-being. Now let's bridge into a new place that has a bit more potential and where things begin to lighten up. Let's see what some 4D levels sound and feel like. This layer of 4D is a place where we ponder. It's more about being curious without a sense of fear of the unknown or forcing energy to try to force a solution or find or fix. We're just sitting back, observing neutrally without being engaged in a situation or trying to force an outcome or to get everyone to agree with our way of looking at things. It's a non-invested level of thought. It's very neutral, and this lowers the low density charge to create more balance. There's no emotional attachment, there's no judgment or predefinition of answers or the possibilities. We can get into this level when we aren't stressed and we have few external demands on us. We ask questions without defined answers, like, I wonder if this would work, or what if I tried that? The question is open-ended when in this level the answer appears where the non-charged question is asked. All we need to do is allow it and not to move from our thoughts outwardly to search for an answer somewhere externally. The answer and the wandering thoughts surrounding the answer then come into your awareness from the broader field of possibilities. They arrive from the ocean that knows everything. So it's a big shift in how we take in information. We're not knowing from our logical, rational mind or from the limited pool of answers from these other external rational mind sources that we see in a 3D reality. These were all generated from the same pool of consciousness that's the rational mind knowledge and experience, and it can only know what it knows through the senses and through material science way of proving something to be true. And there's so much more beyond that it can't look at or measure because it can't comprehend that it could be even possible. And I'll also say that we need to think a little differently about our brains. Our brains are amazing processors if you think of the processor in your computer. So it's not that our brain is a bad thing that we want to turn off in any way, but they're not the originator of thought. The thought actually comes from when we're opened in this way, that ocean, an infinite ocean that knows everything. And it's only when, like a lens, is very shrunk down into our little human experience that we've only filled our brain up with the things that came out of that limited rational mind pool, that's where we're just kind of recycling that information and there's nothing beyond it that can come through. So if you think of it, we're like opening the lens to make more light come in, we're opening the lens of consciousness into the ocean. And now the way we learn is that we don't have to memorize things the way we used to. We have access to the ocean. So it's a very big change, and it can be kind of disorienting as you switch from one way to the other. So the process of exploration and learning really starts to unfold by itself. It becomes effortless, and you're simply watching, observing, and allowing the process from a place of neutral curiosity. And in this case, we'll just plant the seed and we'll talk more about it later. What we're referring to as the ocean is the higher mind, the divine mind. And so we're changing our reference point for our reality from this little tiny rational mind that's just this computer trying to process and make sense of things, which is useful, but it shouldn't be running the show, to now opening up to this infinite mind of the divine consciousness. And so this is when we start to step into present time, fourth dimensional consciousness, because you'll never be able to access the ocean or the higher mind from the past or by looking into the future with fear. And this is another way that the 4D starts to be more fun. It starts to get really creative and quieter here. And this is where your consciousness begins to naturally and organically pull together many of the floating, curious pieces and starts to combine them with the deeper unconscious aspects of you and organizing them in such a way that you become much more conscious, focused, and capable of your own innate wisdom. It takes the curious interest of the field of possibilities and it brings it to your mental workbench to organize and become more real as a possibility. And this is done not with greater thought or concentration, but with greater quietness, allowing, stillness, and trust. You have to be receptive to receive this information. And this is also sometimes known as intuitive knowing. The answers come to where the questions are asked. It's an awareness, and as if you've heard the words but can't define where they came from. They just show up. Living in this level of thought and its accompanying emotions, much more peaceful, and it's truly the beginning of our magic. It's inspiration, it's inspired. And many artists and writers create within this layer. They're able to somehow access it in their own consciousness. And the creation process just flows, and the book or the painting or the musical score seems to create itself. And that's why, as humans, we see this happen in our 3D state, and we say, wow, they're a genius, because they actually have accessed the divine mind in a part of their being. And this is what we call sometimes being in the flow or being in the zone. It's an alpha brainwave state, more smoothed out and harmonious. It's a state of well-being. It's not being generated from fear and stress. And this is the starting point we need to arrive at to do our light magic and have balanced results. Now let's move even further into starting to look at what a 5D state of consciousness and thoughts and emotions would be, and understand why we're practicing at this 4D level a lot, so we can create a bridge into the 5D levels of creation as thought and emotion. And ironically, the higher you evolve, the quieter and stiller things become. The crazy, busy 3D mind slows and stills into a void space. And this is the true space of creative power. All our practices have foundational skills you will need to master in order to get to this space. And this is more appropriately called the level of no thought, which is an interesting paradox that we'll talk more about later. This level is like the great meditation where you find yourself easily sitting still for hours with no need to move or change anything. This level is extremely quiet, and it's a place where you begin to access deeper fields of awareness. You begin to think, or really more accurately, exist without thoughts or words. This occurs because you're in a higher fourth and eventually a fifth dimensional field of knowledge. You're merging your consciousness with the ocean of consciousness that knows everything. And this is where you will draw from to begin to create at a much higher level and with much more light. And this will bring the perfected balance and harmony that you seek, and it will bring precision. You begin to have conscious access to the greatness that you are as your larger memory matrix is opening all that you are beyond that human walking around having an experience. It's the soul matrix. It's much more vast, eternal, and grand than your little self, your little human self can imagine. So this is all you stepping back into you. In this space, you begin to have a sure sense of your powerfulness, your presence, and your own capability to accomplish anything. And this is where a thought enters the physical form from the non-physical form, so it's pre-creation. So it's a very powerful place to be. And this is where the magical tools we're learning truly begin to be able to be used to arrange and rearrange all possibilities in the field of creation without limitation. And although no thought is thought in your words, everything comes effortlessly to you as an understanding, an intuitive knowing. You just know. And you don't need to prove it because it's so certain. In this level, you begin to play in the fifth dimensional where time, space, and gravity all operate differently than what is understood in the 3D. We move into the quantum realm, and this is the place where alchemy occurs, where you begin to change things with great precision. You become the true creator of your reality here. In this space, you will live most of your day in a sense of balance and ease. And from here, you can do what's necessary to allow more light to enter your own body. In this space, you begin to know yourself as soul and eventually as higher self and as source itself. So 5D, and even as we move into beyond this, what we can even explain that are possible, it becomes, as you move into higher states, indefinable with words, and you really can't use any sense of limited human understanding that we have. You just have to experience it. There's really no human words to describe it. This is where you and the thought that thought you into existence think together as one. And this is where you're in full relationship with soul higher self, when you and the soul higher self complex begin to think as one. Within the higher aspect of creator, you begin to think together in the unified field of consciousness as one united consciousness. There's no longer a third or fourth dimensional being. You become the divine part of you. You merge into that level of yourself. And all the false ideas, the fearful, pre-processed conditioned ideas of your lower human self just begin to disappear as if they never existed. And here you can begin to play very consciously as a citizen of the fifth dimension, and you even will have access into higher dimensions as you master this. You still have physicality. You're still in a physical body as you know it, but you've changed your presentation, cellular and atomic presentation, to become more of a crystallized light body and less physically dense as a carbon-based organic form. The living light body is now becoming available to you, and we're preparing the foundations of this journey into your divine self.